Hey everyone, Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We're back here in Pittsburgh after the NFL Combine. I want to talk about some of the biggest winners, but we got to talk about that wide receiver trade that happened over the weekend and why the Steelers weren't in it and why I think that's a good thing. That and our Mock Draft Monday winner, all here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show in your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the number one sportsbook in America. Right now, FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if they hit on their first bet of $5 or more. More on them later. All right, Steelers fans, I'm back from the Combine and from a number of other things. I was in Notre Dame and South Bend, Indiana for that. I was in Indianapolis for a week and then had to go to Louisville, Kentucky. Got back late Sunday night, and here we are making our episode for Monday. And we got a lot to talk about. Now, I'll get back to the Combine because that's the big thing to talk about, and that's the big thing that I've been studying. We got results and everything, but I want to focus on some of the things that were said. But before we can do that, I wanted to address the big trade that happened. It's not necessarily a big trade, but it's the trade that everyone in Pittsburgh was talking about it being made and why the Steelers weren't in on it. And that's Deebo Samuel going from the 49ers to the Washington Commanders. Now, Deebo Samuel, obviously, a wide receiver that's been talented. He's been an all-pro player before in the NFL. Goes for a fifth-round pick to the Commanders, and immediately Steelers fans breaking out on social media saying, like, why couldn't the Steelers be involved for a fifth-round pick? But as I said on this show back when there were rumors about Deebo Samuels being the guy that you wanted that's going to be on the market, I was just not so sure that he was going to be the guy that the Steelers wanted to trade for, simply because of where he fits in what the Steelers would want to do. Now, I had some fans pose me, well, Chris, wouldn't he do something similar to Cordero Patterson, but be a little bit be better? And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. But I don't think that's the receiver type the Steelers should be going after. I don't think that the Steelers should be going after a guy who can line up in the slot / be the extra ball carrier, running back type guy, play in there. And listen, he lined up majority out wide in this last season, and he was fine. But I think the Steelers need to be going for a guy, if they're going to trade for in the trade market, they need to be going for a guy who can win consistently while lining up outside and be a true threat for them for at least the next few years at that position. And also not trading a guy that's going to tank a big chunk of your salary cap, even if it's just for this season. Deebo Samuel right now with the Commanders, and granted, this probably gets renegotiated a bit and they figure out a way to make this work because he has 1 year left on his deal. But his cap hit for the Commanders in this season right now, if it was to go through as is, will be $17.4 million. And I just don't think a guy who had 670 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns last season is worth $17.4 million. But again, the Commanders are probably going to try to work out a new deal with him and get that there. But again, I just don't think that was the move. I've been saying for a while, the Steelers need to go out, and if they're going to make a trade, if they're going to make a big get in the off season as a veteran receiver to add, there's other options out there. One of those options is Deebo Samuel's teammate, who supposedly, if the internet's to be believed, is being shopped yet again. And that's the San Francisco 49ers, of course, shopping Brandon Ayuk. And this just feels all too familiar. And I do feel like we are back with the Mr. Krause meet. And the next day, and the next day, and the next day. It just keeps happening because it just never stops. And it's why I made that meme in the first place, because you get tired of it after a while. You guys might be tired of it now. I was tired of it last February. But Brandon Ayuk, if you're looking at this, if it's even remotely possible this has happened. Remember, he just signed a new deal with the Niners. That was the big reason why it was a hang up there. He's still 27. This season, he's going to be a $10.7 million cap hit, but that skyrockets in a few years. He'll be $16.2 million in 2026, $42.2 in 2027, $44.1 in 2028, and by that time he'll be 30 years old. So, look, Brandon Ayuk would have made sense, but I'm sorry. I look at those numbers and I'm thinking I don't know if he's all that, if you know what I'm saying. Like I think that's a bit rich for my blood as far as that, especially if you're going to give up decent compensation for him in a trade. Now, a player that I'm a little more interested in could be a guy like Courtland Sutton, who I've been saying he's more of that pure outside receiving threat. His salary cap for the Broncos right now is $20.2 million. And right now, if they were to move him, they'd only save $6.87 million in the salary cap because they have a lot of dead money tied up in him. So with that, maybe you say like, okay, well, you're maybe kicking a little bit higher of a pick or something to get him off of him. But I think the Broncos are going to try to move on from him at some point. If they are, the Steelers could be the team that jumps in front of that. But something that I remind you of that Omar Khan said that I think is very relevant going to this conversation. And I said, hey, there's a lot of things to not pay attention to or to not take so literally or not try to peel too much back about what Omar Khan said, because his job is to protect the team and not let you know what his hand is. But one thing I thought that was very accurate was when he talked about, adding players, especially receivers. You need to know who your quarterback is when you're adding a certain type of receiver, because you need to be getting a receiver that fits the skills of that quarterback. So a lot of this is going to be predicated. Do they get Justin Fields? Do they get Russell Wilson? Do they get some other identity? But I think Courtland Sutton's a guy that can work with whoever you get there with the way that this offense is structured. With the way that you're looking at right now, if George Pickens is going to be sticking around for the long haul, you can get a Courtland Sutton, and then all of a sudden you got multiple slot options that aren't trying to be the top playmaker or the second big playmaker in the offense. Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson, when he's healthy, can be more in their natural roles of working the middle part of the field, being small and shifty, and in Austin's instance, very, very fast. And then while Sutton and Pickens be the guy on the outsides that if you leave them in one-on-one, they're going to give you a problem unless you have a shutdown cornerback. And so that is why I think the Steelers should be going for that kind of receiver. I'm not even sold entirely on Courtland Sutton, but I just think that's the look that they need to be going for right now at wide receiver. And they shouldn't ignore trades. I'm not saying that whenever I talk down the trade idea, I think it's just like, I don't think this is the right move with this one. And I think it was right of them to not try to be the team that tries to trade for Deebo Samuel. But I do wonder if there's going to be a trade soon, as far as getting another guy in on the roster, especially at the wide receiver position, because that's a big talking point. It's something that the Steelers need, as Nick Farabaugh pointed out on social media this week. The Steelers, don't have supreme quarterback talent, so they need to make it easier on whoever their quarterback is, and getting two playmaker wide receivers and some really good athletes. That's one way to deal with it. So who are some of those athletes in the draft, though, that fit that? That's what we're going to talk about next, because I thought there were some really impressive interviews. And to me, I'm starting to solidify more and more who I think could be the top receivers for the Steelers to look at in this draft class. We'll talk about that and get to your mock draft Monday in a bit here. I'm Chris Carter here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I remind you, this show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just beginning on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because FanDuel is your home for NBA live betting. So even if you miss the first minutes of the game or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can make your picks from the first whistle until the final buzzer. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a bigger shot at a bigger payout. But however you want to play, now is the perfect time to join, because new customers at FanDuel can get started with $150 at bonus bets if you hit on your first bet of $5 or more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join them today. That's FanDuel.com for your one shot at $150 in bonus bets when you hit your first bet of $5 or more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook betting partner of the NBA. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue to talk about the wide receiver position, because we talked about a lot of other positions. We talked corners on Friday. We talked DTs on Thursday, and wide receiver is absolutely a need. And if you're one of those people that thinks the Steelers should go get a wide receiver in the first round, well, I think you got some good numbers to support that theory when you looked at what happened at the combine this past weekend. Now, the thing that everyone's going to talk about is the guy who finished as the fastest receiver, and that was Matthew Golden out of Texas. Originally unofficially listed at 4.3, he actually finished with a 4.29. So he was actually pretty good at that. He got into the 4.2s, a really good sign, really good mark for him. But also when you look at Matthew Golden, his explosiveness, his playmaking ability, and that adds up, and it's going to shoot up his market, because I think Matthew Golden is a viable target for the Steelers in the first round. I think that he's a guy that's going to be there. But there were other guys who dazzled as well. I thought one guy that when I looked across all the boards, my sleeper guy that I think had a really good combine is Ty Felton out of Maryland. Alan and I had talked about him before, but he had a 4.37 in the 40-yard dash, which I found very, very impressive there. He had a 1 point. He had the third best 10-yard split on the 40-yard dash. He had the fourth best vertical jump. He had the fifth best broad jump. He had the he wasn't as fast on the 3-cone drills. Actually, it looks like he didn't run the 3-cone drills, so that's my mistake there. But still, he showed to be very among the most explosive and among the fastest in this draft class. And I think that's something to go there for Ty Felton. But as far as the top guys, there were two guys that really stood out to me on the podium days, and they're going to be guys that everyone's watching. Matthew Golden, I thought, really impressed, but so did Emeka Egbuka. And that's where I want to look at for these draft class, because in the first round, to me, if the Steelers want to go get a playmaker wide receiver, there's going to be an opportunity there. Luther Burden is the other candidate there that everyone's going to talk about. But Emeka Egbuka, Luther Burden, Matthew Golden are, to me, the three guys the Steelers could be looking at. I wouldn't consider Tataroa, McMillan as a real option there. The guy out of Arizona, Travis Hunter as well. Those just aren't happening. But you look at what the Steelers could do with some of these first round receivers. The key thing is, I think that the Steelers, though, need people that are going to be fitting the profile that you want, leadership-wise, as far as how they present themselves. And I thought both of these guys handled themselves very well. I want you to listen to Emeka Egbuka when I ask this question and the breakdown that he gets into to explain when I ask him this. This is Emeka Egbuka, the Ohio State wide receiver at the NFL Combine, when I was asking him questions.
You talked about film study of opponents. What's an example of a time where you film studied yourself and you found something that you were able to fix on the field?
Film study of myself?
Yeah, like just criticizing yourself and working on yourself.
Yeah, I think, whenever I do watch myself, I'm my own hardest critic. I think part of the reason that I've excelled at Ohio State is because Coach Hartline and I share a very similar mindset. We're perfectionists to the nth degree, so I think that every time we watch film, I never tell myself, good job in my head. So I'm always critiquing myself, whether it's run blocking, route running, my splits before the play, just making sure I'm playing with the DB mentally. So it's all a game for me. It's all an art, and I love learning the art of receiver.
Have you met with the Steelers informally or formally?
I've met with the Steelers formally.
That's also an important part of this. The Steelers met with all three of those receivers I named formally, and several others, either formally or informally. They are prioritizing DT and wide receiver in the early rounds. As I said on the Friday show, I think I talked to over 12 cornerbacks and over 12 defensive tackles. And on those first few days, defensive tackles got a far bigger share of the Steelers' official attention of prospects during the combine. So, but wide receivers to me were right up there. The Steelers were doing their due diligence, and that tells me they're preparing for those to be the two positions that the Steelers get ready to go after. Now, back to Egbuka and what he was talking about here. I was really impressed by Egbuka at the podium because he answered so many different questions and he gave thoughtful responses. He looked like he was ready and prepared, and that's a good sign. And coaches would love to see that. And if he's doing that to the media, he's probably doing that in his meetings. And he's a thinker. If you know anything about his time at Ohio State and you see like the stuff that he was celebrated for, he was a huge part of that team in a very big way, even if he wasn't the best purely talented wide receiver. But as a leader, he fits there. And the Steelers need leaders on offense. That's a big part of it. And so if you get an Emeka Egbuka, and you get a guy like that can work for you long term, that'd be awesome. And then you have a young guy that can be the future tone setter. But I wouldn't also sleep on Matthew Golden either, because Egbuka hasn't tested yet because he suffered. I think I actually forget why he didn't test, but he's going to run his 40 at the Ohio State Pro Day in a bit. So that's one thing we didn't get to see his full speed. But hey, Egbuka, we've certainly seen hit the highlights of them. But the one guy we did get to see the speed of, it was Matthew Golden. And a lot of times when there's a combine standout, oftentimes they might be the least trained as far as how to handle the podium. But I don't think either Egbuka or Golden were unprepared for the podium and for what it entailed. Here was Matthew Golden out of Texas, how he did it. And this is before he ran that 40-yard dash that, didn't set a record, but it did set the pace for the rest of the receiver class. I want to get you a chance to listen to Matthew Gold when I was asking him questions about his process.
You mentioned like tempo a couple times with your route running. Can you kind of share with us like how that helps you, separate?
Just making the corner or whoever's guarding me feel my presence. If I have a snap route or anytime you route that I have to come back to the quarterback, making him feel my presence. Taking him vertically and then being able to snap down on the move. That's something I'm good at, and I just practice that each and every day to perfect my craft.
You mentioned like obviously you're a high key separator. If you had one route to get open, like to win the game at the next level, what are you gonna run?
I would run a comeback or a curl. One-on-one. If it's third down, fourth down, we need it. I know I can make that play.
How much is film study part of your preparation to get ready to let you know what routes you need to win with?
Just understanding who we're playing that week, what type of defense they like, if their corners are physical. I try to do that every day, get as much film in as I can. When I prepare the right way, it allows me to go out there and play fast.
Have you met with the Steelers formally or informally yet?
Formally.
How was that, and who'd you talk to?
Coach Tomlin, man, he's cool. He's a great dude. That coaching staff is tremendous. When I went in there, we didn't talk a lot of ball. They just wanted to get to know me as a player off the field. And, I just let them know my story. And that's where it went.
So a few things there. I liked both of these guys getting into the details of how they worked to be better. That's one of the things I ask almost every prospect at the combine when I get a chance, because everyone wants to know, what's your favorite emoji? What's this? What's that? There's these ridiculous questions that I think sometimes it's like, all right, we get that, but I think, like, who's your favorite player? It's, that's cool and all, but I want this guy to tell me about their work. I want to see what drives you, what put it into you, or what was your biggest challenges? How did you overcome those challenges? Tell us about your stories about how you've gotten to be better, because that's what coaches are going to want to know. That's what they're going to want to see. And so sometimes you get some great answers and some detailed ones. Other times you don't. I asked Luther Burden about that question. He wasn't that great of an answer. It wasn't that didn't list everything out. And that doesn't mean he's going to be a bad player. It just means that that's not something he was ready to talk about in that moment. But Egbuka and Golden both were. And to me, that shows maturity on their side, and the way they also talked about their situations. Obviously, they put a lot of thought into those situations. And I really do think if the Steelers can find a playmaker wide receiver in this draft, they have a good chance to put themselves in a much better situation for the wide receiver position as a whole in the future. And I know that sounds redundant because you're like, well, duh, they're drafting a high receiver, but hear me out here. If they are able to get a high-end wide receiver, and for the record, I am still thinking also, I forgot to say, shout out Derek Bell. He was the one that asked those two first questions. And it was actually perfect timing because he got those two and then I got mine two in. And Derek is the man. You so follow him at SteelersDB because he does a great job. I was glad to hang out with him this past week. But back to this, if the Steelers got Egbuka or Golden or whoever in this draft class at a high pick, and they turned out to be the franchise wide receiver, you could be in a situation where whatever you want to do with George Pickens, it gives you all the opportunities, because then you can sign, if you traded for or signed that big time federal, big time veteran wide receiver, and you pair that with George Pickens, then you add this guy, and then you have Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson. Then all of a sudden you have a crew this year. But then if you have this guy that you drafted high on a 4-year deal with the 5th-year extension being possible, you're in a position where you can make a lot of changes. And if that guy's on a rookie deal, you can sign George Pickens to a 3-year deal if you really wanted that, or you can find other answers. And I think that's the thing about the Steelers' current wide receiver situation. It's not a great wide receiver class, but there are plenty of guys that I think would be really good starters in the NFL. And it's why I also don't think that they need to be rushing to trade for, and give up serious compensation right now for like a Brandon Ayuk. I think that the Steelers should be minding their business, should be doing their research. They should be looking at these guys, and then also check in to see what with who's available. But I think that this was a really good thing to see some of these guys, and the demeanor that which we got to see from Egbuka and Golden. Imagine if the Steelers, got a leader in their locker room through the wide receiver position that came through naturally in the organization, and can help with the culture of everything, and also becomes a long-term answer. Because then also, say you draft that guy, you're paying him a rookie salary this upcoming season, then you could go get you can make other moves. You can go sign Devontae Adams. And all of a sudden, Devontae Adams there for a couple of years. George Pickens and said rookie, along with again Austin and Wilson. There's potentials here. There's a lot of potentials for the Steelers to make moves, and I think that there's some really interesting wide receivers to look at in this draft class. We'll continue to look at them as we move forward. But we got to get to our mock draft Monday winner. You all submitted all throughout the weekend, and I appreciate y'all doing that. So we're going to announce our winner shortly after this right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our show here today as we're wrapping up our first Monday back from the NFL Combine. And trust, we're going to have a lot of challenge. We're gonna have a lot of stuff, content, and talk about the Combine and other positions and other players and such. And we'll be going over the information as we start to organize it and get a sense who did what for all the drills. But I think it's always cool to do the mock draft Monday winner, because we get a chance, as if you follow me on social medias anywhere at Carter Critiques, or you're in the Locked On Steelers Facebook group, you get a chance to post screenshots of your mock draft to get a chance to be talked on the show. And I thought it would be prudent if I were to do a mock draft. I didn't make this an official rule, but I thought it'd be prudent if I were to do a mock draft Monday, and it included a wide receiver as the first round pick for the Steelers. Even though I still don't think that that's the plan for the Steelers, I'm keeping my options open, being ready for to be flexible there. So I think that's something that we'll look at there. So let's get to the mock draft Monday winner here. This one comes from Jace Burris in the Locked On Steelers Facebook group. Shout out Chase. Now, I want to note something here, because someone's gonna freak out when they see this, because all three of Jace's first 3 picks are Ohio State guys, but the fit for them, I think, is very interesting, and it leads to the conversation that I want to talk about here about these positions and the Steelers' needs. First, Chase goes out and gets Emeka Egbuka with the 21st overall pick. Solid pick. I think Egbuka is right there. Again, personally, I'm more of a DT guy. I think that if Derek Harmon's there or Kenneth Grant's there, you go with one of those guys. But I get what's going on here, because then in the second round, he goes and gets Tyleik Williams. And if you had checked in earlier, maybe like a month ago, Tyleik Williams was looking like a first round guy to a lot of people. And then, more and more people saw some of his limitations in the pass rush, and that he was more of a run stuffer right now, and they're not sure if he'd figure out the pass rush. He moved down a bit, but getting him in the second round as a space eater in the middle of that D line, that could be an answer. And then at 83, he went and got Quinshon Judkins, the running back out of Ohio State. So the 3 straight Ohio State guys there. I wonder where Jace went to college, but still, Jace, I thought these were some interesting picks here, because you were able to address 3 big needs for the Steelers: wide receiver, DT, and running back, because without Najee Harris, they do need to address it. And Quinshon Judkins, I do like him as a prospect, as a potential guy to flip things around for the Steelers in the backfield, or just add further to the Steelers running back position. looking around at some of these other picks, Zy Alexander, the cornerback out of LSU, David Walker, edge rusher out of Central Arkansas. Got to be honest, I'm not too familiar with either of those, but Riley Leonard at quarterback at Notre Dame, man, it's a good thing that's pick 180. Otherwise, which apparently he got from the Titans in a trade because he traded back in the 5th round, so we got a 6th and the 7th round pick for it. Good job, Jace. But Riley Leonard, not the quarterback I'd be going for in this draft class. I think Will Howard is still my guy in this draft class if you're going for a middle rounds guy. And then Cam Jackson, defensive lineman out of Florida, Joshua Gray, offensive lineman out of Oregon State, and then edge rusher Tyler Batty out of BYU. Those are all the mock draft picks here for Jace. But what do you think about Jace's draft? Because again, Ohio State aside, I think this is a very interesting group of players, and especially the positions that you go there. Outside of corner, which he does address in the 4th round, these are the top concerns when it comes to the Steelers. The Steelers investment right now. They want to get a playmaker wide receiver. They want to get a stuffing physical defensive tackle, and they want a running back that can help boost their backfield. But I think the Steelers, they're waiting for some dominoes to fall, just like we talked about with the wide receiver position. They want to see what quarterback they get, and that's something that Omar Khan said. That you could actually take him on his word for, and so you probably won't know what kind of receiver you get until you see what kind of quarterback the Steelers decide to keep around. So because again, Russell Wilson's play style very differently than Justin Fields, and they're going to have to work that out. But again, for this mock draft Monday winner, and there were a lot of really good ones. I chose this one mainly particularly because we were talking about wide receivers at the start of this show with all the things that were going on. And I thought it'd be a good callback. So again, I'm not on the board for picking all the Ohio State guys. I mean, maybe it's cool, but I think Egbuka, Williams, Judkins, that's really good first, second, and third round value in my opinion. Looking at how they played. And that would have a chance to make a difference next year and also be part of the leadership moving forward. So all that said, congratulations to Jace Burris for being our first Mock Draft Monday winner here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. There's still so much to cover about this combine. I still have so many videos that I have gathered, and I still need to cut them up and everything. But bottom line is, I think the Steelers are in a spot where, as I will continue to tell you all until I don't think it, that at 21, they're going to get a really good shot at a really good player. And that's something that they need to be ready for in all directions. And we'll keep getting you ready for it here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, all the social medias at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every Monday through Friday. Back tomorrow with more on your Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.